On the day of my mother's funeral, my father brought his mistress and took Mom's wedding ring off her cold hand. He said, "She won't be needing this, right?" So I snatched it back, walked out, and booked a one-way flight. 1 month later, when I got a call from a hospital asking if I could identify a man in intensive care, because, Dad, seriously? At Mom's funeral? She's gone, Iris. She doesn't need it anymore. That's not the point. God, you really don't see it, do you? What, that you're overreacting like your mother always did? And that was the last conversation I had with my father before I booked a one-way flight out of the country. I'm 32, only child, no kids, and until recently, I lived about 20 minutes from my parents in Eugene, Oregon. My mother, Alina, passed away 6 weeks ago after a grueling 14-month battle with cancer. I took care of her during the worst of it, sitting with her during chemo, taking her to doctor's appointments, helping her bathe when her body stopped cooperating. My father, Leonard, helped, at first. But toward the end, he got more distant, started disappearing more frequently, until one night she admitted she didn't think he was coming home anymore for her, he was coming home for appearances. I suspected an affair. But I didn't press her. She didn't want to talk about it. I think she didn't want to tarnish what was left of her memories. She was always like that, kept her pain neat, folded and tucked away, never a burden to anyone else. When she passed, I planned the funeral myself. My father helped a little, signed a few papers, paid for a portion of the casket, but he mostly stayed quiet. I figured it was grief. I was wrong. On the day of the funeral, I was standing near the casket talking to my mother's sister when I saw him walk in. Not alone. With her. A tall, striking woman in a bright red dress under a black fur-lined coat. Sunglasses perched on her head like she was about to step into brunch. Not a single tear in sight. People stared. You could feel the air shift, like a tension in the chest. Someone whispered her name, Marlena. That's how I finally knew for sure. She was real. He brought his mistress to my mother's funeral. And then, as if that weren't enough, during the final goodbye, when people were slowly walking past the casket one last time, he leaned down and slipped the wedding ring off my mother's finger. She won't be needing this, right? I was frozen at first. My body couldn't quite register the horror. I walked over, my heels crunching against the gravel. My father barely glanced at me as I grabbed his wrist. I opened his palm, took the ring, and walked away. No yelling. No scene. Just silence. 3 hours later, I was at the airport. I hadn't packed anything. Just booked the first international flight I could find that didn't require a visa. Ended up in Lisbon, Portugal, in a tiny Airbnb tucked between pastel buildings and narrow stone alleys. I didn't tell anyone where I went. Not even my friends. I turned off my American phone number. Got a cheap SIM card and paid in cash. I wandered around the Alfama district during the day, sat in cafes with paper tablecloths and smoked cigarettes I didn't even like. At night, I'd cry on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan, wondering if I had lost my mind. I wasn't running away. I was escaping. There's a difference. I didn't expect to stay long. But then, I didn't expect what happened next either. A month later, my burner phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail at first. But something, maybe guilt or curiosity or some lingering obligation, told me to listen. It was a man from Riverbend Hospital in Eugene. My father had been in a car accident. He was unconscious. I was still listed as his emergency contact. They needed someone to come identify him and make decisions. I didn't even know he still had me listed. At first, I thought, no. Let someone else deal with him. But there was no one else. No siblings. No other family that was close enough or cared enough. I was it. So I went back. Jet-lagged, emotionally fried, and still furious, I walked into that hospital with a sour taste in my mouth and no idea what I was even hoping for. Closure? Revenge? A final confrontation? What I found was pathetic. He was hooked up to machines. Face bruised. Right arm in a cast. Breathing on his own, but barely conscious. The nurse confirmed it was a drunk driving accident. He had been leaving someone's apartment late at night. I didn't have to ask whose. Marlena wasn't at the hospital. She hadn't come. I sat by his bedside, not out of love but out of some ingrained responsibility I couldn't shake. I thought about my mother. How even when she was dying, she never said a bad word about him. She still asked how he was doing. He woke up after a few days. He was groggy, confused. But when he saw me, he started crying. Real tears. The kind I hadn't seen since my 10th birthday when I fell off my bike and broke my wrist. Iris, he said, voice scratchy. I didn't speak. She's gone. I know she's gone, but I didn't. I didn't think. I waited. For an apology. For an explanation. For something. She left me, he whispered. Marlena. Said she was only in it because she thought I'd get something from the estate. When I didn't, she vanished. He looked broken. Small. Not like the man who tried to steal a wedding ring from his dead wife's hand. Not like the man who abandoned her in her final months. Just a shell. She said I was boring, he added. That I had too many ghosts. The irony of it all nearly choked me. I don't know how to be alone, he said. And that was the most honest thing he'd ever said in his life. I didn't forgive him. Not then. Maybe not ever fully. But I didn't leave either. He had no one else. I stayed for a few weeks. Arranged rehab. Handled the insurance. Sold his truck to cover medical bills. Marlena's number stopped working a week after the accident. Probably blocked him. Or disappeared altogether. I moved him into a small assisted living place just outside the city. Not because I wanted to rebuild our relationship. But because I couldn't stand the thought of him dying alone in a hospital bed. I still wear my mother's ring. Not on my finger, on a chain around my neck. It's a reminder of everything she endured. Everything I came from. And everything I will never allow myself to accept from someone again. I haven't gone back to Portugal. Not yet. But I think I will. There was something peaceful about that version of me, lost but honest, hurting but free. Right now, I'm back in Eugene, but I'm not the same person. I'm working at a bookstore downtown while figuring out what's next. I don't speak to my father often, just enough to make sure he's eating and taking his meds. I don't hate him. I just don't owe him my heart anymore. Sometimes I wonder what Mom would have said if she saw him now, gaunt, quiet, sitting in a wheelchair in a room with beige wallpaper and a TV that never changes from the news. He barely watches it. Mostly stares out the window like he's waiting for someone who isn't coming. The staff like him, though. He says please and thank you, doesn't make too much trouble, and reads the paper every morning like he's clinging to routine. I visit once or twice a week, bringing him bananas and crossword books. Sometimes he tries to joke, but there's a fragility in his voice now, like even his humor might collapse under its own weight. I don't stay long when I go. Maybe half an hour. I leave before it gets dark. He asked me once if I hated him. I didn't answer right away. I told him I didn't know what I felt. That was true. I've replayed that funeral moment so many times in my head, him taking the ring, that smug tone, Marlena standing there like she belonged. I don't think he truly realizes how damaging that moment was. Maybe he never will. He's told me a few times that Marlena called herself his second chance. She said Mom held him back. That he believed her. I was tired, he said. Tired of being around death. What a luxury it must be, to choose to step away from grief instead of having it collapse on you. I remember the night I found Mom in the kitchen, maybe 3 months before she passed. She was standing at the sink in her nightgown, just holding a dish towel and staring into space. "He doesn't touch me anymore," she said, barely a whisper. "Sometimes I wonder if I died already and no one told me." That's what I think about when people ask if I've forgiven him. That moment. That sentence. That weight. Forgiveness doesn't erase memory. It doesn't rewrite the past. It just makes the present tolerable. I've gone back to therapy since coming home. My therapist, Laura, is one of the few people I can talk to without shrinking. She asked me what I wanted from all this. From him. From the grief. From myself. And I didn't know how to answer. I still don't. I've started to keep a journal again. I write down one memory of my mother every morning. Not the big ones, birthdays or holidays, but the quiet ones. The smell of her tea. The way she hummed while folding towels. The sound of her slippers on the kitchen floor. That's how I keep her close. Meanwhile, I'm trying to rebuild a life. It's slow. There are days when I feel nothing. Other days, I feel everything all at once. Ava, my cousin, is the only person who really gets it. She was close to Mom too, and while she hated my father long before I did, she's careful not to push me either way. "You don't owe him a relationship," she told me once. "But you also don't owe him your rage. You're allowed to just exist without being defined by him." That hit me harder than anything. So now, I'm in this limbo. Not mourning. Not healing. Just existing. Watching my father shrink into someone I barely recognize. Watching myself learn how to breathe again after a year of holding it all in. I still have the plane ticket saved on my email, the return to Lisbon I never used. Part of me wonders what it would feel like to just go back. Sit by the same cafe window and let the breeze hit my face again. Watch strangers pass and not be anyone to anyone. But for now, I'm here. Not out of obligation. Not out of pity. Just because I'm not done yet. There's something strange about watching a parent become smaller than you remember. Not just physically, though that's part of it. I used to think my father took up too much space in every room, too loud, too certain, too proud. Now, he sits with his shoulders hunched and asks me if I can refill his denture cleaner. I don't even flinch at it anymore. I just nod, do it, and place it back by the sink without saying much. The place he's in, Oak Haven Assisted Living, is decent. Not fancy, but clean and quiet, tucked next to a small wooded area that catches the light beautifully in the late afternoon. I think they did that on purpose, like nature is supposed to soften the reality of the building. Sometimes he talks about the past, but only in fragments. Once, while I was helping him go through an old shoebox of photos, he paused at one of Mom standing in front of a carousel on the Oregon coast, her hair blowing sideways, holding a soft serve cone with sprinkles. "I took that," he said. He didn't say anything else for a full minute. Just looked at it, then placed it aside and rubbed his temple like the memory hurt. "I kept that photo." He didn't notice. I've started volunteering at a small outreach program for families dealing with long-term care situations. They have these Tuesday night circles where people talk about aging parents, caregiving, grief, resentment. I haven't spoken yet, but I will. I listen. One woman, whose mother had dementia, said something that stuck with me: "You think forgiveness is this lightning bolt moment. But for me, it was just wearing down. Like a rock getting smooth after years of water." That hit something inside me I didn't know was still hard. I still think about Marlena. I never saw her again, and truthfully, I don't think I ever will. She didn't leave a note or a message or even a post online that I could find. She disappeared like smoke, quick, effortless, uncaring. I wonder if she ever loved him, or if it was always about leverage. He says she made him feel alive. That makes me sad, honestly. That someone so emotionally stunted thought he had to burn everything down just to feel something. I tried calling her once. A week after I returned from Portugal, late at night, wine in my system and tears were threatening. The number was disconnected. I didn't try again. Some days, I still wear my mother's ring under my shirt. It's strange how much comfort I get from that little thing, more than any apology or explanation ever gave me. It feels like a piece of her stayed with me, unspoiled. When I touch it, I remember her brushing my hair as a kid or humming along to Carole King while cooking. I've begun writing again, too, not just journaling, but short essays. Stories about care, grief, womanhood. A small local magazine picked one up. It was about the way women inherit emotional labor and how we're expected to manage everyone's mess while grieving in silence. I used a pen name. But when I saw it in print, something in me loosened. There's still anger inside me. Still those flashbacks to the funeral, the ring, the red dress, the way he acted like it was all casual. I don't think that memory will ever soften the way others do. But lately, I've been trying to give space to other things, too. Not just the pain, but the in-between moments. I took a day trip to the coast alone last week, Mom's favorite stretch near Yatchet's. I brought a thermos of coffee, her old playlist downloaded on my phone, and a blanket she knitted when I was in high school. I sat on the sand, let the cold air hit my face, and I cried without trying to stop it. Not the ugly kind. Just tears that came without permission and didn't need to be justified. I think I needed that. My dad has started drawing. Of all things. The staff set up an art group for the residents, and now he sits in his room sketching trees or lighthouses from old magazines. He's not good, but he tries. He gave me one drawing last week, a crooked little cabin next to a lake. Saw this in a brochure, he said, made me think of you. Peaceful. I didn't know how to respond. I said thanks, took it, and taped it to the side of my fridge when I got home. He's trying. I know that. It doesn't undo the years. Doesn't make up for what he took from my mother, or how much of my own peace he stole in the process. But it's something. Maybe not redemption. But a faint, flickering effort. And maybe that's all we get sometimes. Not big cinematic apologies or deep revelations. Just soft gestures in the aftermath. I don't know what our relationship is now. He calls me once a week to talk about his blood pressure readings or the way the nurse overwaters the plants. I answer, I listen, I nod. I don't call it love. I don't call it forgiveness. Lately, I've noticed something strange. When I talk about my dad to others, I've stopped using past tense. That caught me off guard. For a long time, I couldn't say my dad is, without clenching my jaw. It was always he was like this, he used to do that. It felt safer to speak of him as a memory rather than a person. A way to distance myself from the man who brought his mistress to my mother's funeral and stripped a ring off her hand like she was just gone. But now, I catch myself saying things like, my dad draws, or my dad likes instant pudding now. Small, strange updates. Harmless ones. And I always feel weird afterward, like I betrayed some version of myself by acknowledging he still exists. Therapy helps. Lara keeps telling me that grief is like an earthquake, you survive the first shock, but the aftershocks come for weeks, months, years. Some feel like nothing. Some knock you down again. But none of them mean you didn't survive the first one. My cousin Ava, on the other hand, has absolutely no filter about it. He's lucky I haven't sent him a glitter explosive full of fleas, she told me once when I vented to her about one of our more awkward visits. She's fiercely loyal to my mom's memory, maybe more than anyone else. After the funeral, she cut my dad off entirely, blocked his number, refused to sit near him at the brief legal reading of Mom's will. She's made it clear she doesn't understand why I even see him at all. Iris, you're not responsible for fixing a man who tore your mother apart. And she's right. I know she's right. But that's not what I'm doing, I think. I'm not trying to fix him. I'm not even trying to forgive him in the full sense of the word. I think I'm just trying to understand what's left when you strip away all the expectations and narratives. When you stop needing someone to be good or evil and just see them as a deeply flawed, aging person who lost everything and doesn't even know how to name what he lost. He told me a story last week. Completely out of the blue. "You remember that time your mom made those blueberry muffins and forgot the sugar?" he asked, sitting at his little table in Oak Haven's garden. I blinked. "Yeah. You said they tasted like drywall." He chuckled, wheezing a bit. "She was so mad. She tossed the whole tray out and made another batch, and then left those on the stove and burned the tops. She cried. And he stopped and looked at his hands. I laughed. Not mean, just because it was such a mess. And she laughed too. That memory didn't even sound like him. Or maybe it was a version of him I never really got to see. A younger, less exhausted man. One who laughed with my mom in the kitchen instead of leaving her to cry alone in the garage like I once saw her do. He started coughing not long after that. I got up and got him water. And for a second, just a second, I saw him as my father again. Not the man from the funeral, but the man who once gave me a tiny, rusty red bike for my 7th birthday and stayed up all night putting it together in the garage, just so I could ride it to school in the morning. Memory is cruel like that. It gives you the soft edges of someone's humanity when all you want to hold on to is the sharpness that justifies your pain. A few days later, the administrator at Oak Haven called to let me know my dad had a bad night. Elevated heart rate, trouble sleeping. They gave him something to help him rest. I drove over the next morning, brought him fresh socks, and read to him from one of those magazines he never finishes. I didn't ask about the episode. He didn't bring it up. But something about him was different. Slower. Like he was sliding further away from the man he used to be, even the version I've grown used to over the past few months. It's not that I fear losing him now. I fear the weight of what's unresolved. That I'll carry it longer than I carried my grief for Mom. Someday, someone will ask me what kind of man my father was, and I won't have a simple answer. Because there isn't one. He was cruel. And careless. And selfish. He was also once kind. Once funny. Once able to look at a woman he spent 3 decades with and laugh at burned muffins in the kitchen. Both are true. And I don't know what to do with that. I've started writing letters to my mom. Not for her, really, but for me. I write them like updates. I tell her about the cafe I want to open. About the drawing my father gave me of the Crooked Lake cabin. About how I found her old perfume in the back of a drawer at the house before I sold it, and how I cried for 20 straight minutes just smelling the cap. I tell her I miss her in ways I didn't even know were possible. That the house is gone, but the hydrangea bush out front bloomed the week I signed the papers, like she was saying goodbye too. Sometimes, I slip in small things about Dad. Not much. Just enough. He's drawing now, I wrote last week. He asks about your blueberry muffins. I think you'd laugh at how bad his sketches are. And then I fold the letters, seal them, and place them in a box I keep under my bed. Maybe someday I'll burn them, or bury them under that hydrangea bush if I can get a cutting of it to grow. For now, I will just keep writing. I didn't go back to Portugal. I didn't have to. Something shifted inside me when I started writing those letters to Mom, and then something else shifted when I started reading them out loud. Not to anyone, just to the room. To the air. To her, maybe. I'd sit on the old armchair in my apartment with a cup of tea, her favorite lavender blend, and read each letter like she was across from me. Eventually, I stopped crying when I read them. And that's when I knew something was changing for Real. Dad started declining slowly. Nothing dramatic. Just more gaps in memory, more confusion. He once called me Alina, and I didn't even correct him. It wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. But here's where it gets interesting. A few months ago, Oak Haven called about some estate paperwork and long-term care costs. My father's finances were finally reaching their edge. There was no house anymore, sold. His savings? Mostly gone. retirement? Minimal. Marlena had burned through a good chunk when she convinced him to open a joint account right before she disappeared. Legally, she wasn't entitled to much, but she was clever, and he was stupid, and so the damage was done before he even realized he was being used. That's when I found out that my mom's will, quietly and meticulously written by her over a year before she passed, had named me the sole beneficiary of everything she owned. But more than that, she had also included a clause. A very specific one. One that was clearly written after she realized what Dad was up to. Leonard Moreno is not to receive, access, borrow against, or profit in any form from my personal estate, insurance policies, or inherited property. This includes marital property that was converted during our marriage into joint assets but was originally inherited through my family. It was notarized. Filed. Unbreakable. I never saw it until the executor, a lawyer named Denise who used to teach pottery with my mom on Saturdays, called and asked if I wanted to do anything with the final paperwork. Mom had even included a note with it, handwritten in blue ink, "Don't let him ruin the things I left behind. You don't owe him your life, Iris. He already took too much from mine." That moment was my turning point. Not the funeral. Not the hospital. Not even the ring. This. This quiet, beautiful act of long-term revenge that my mother had carefully set in motion while dying. A protective boundary that reached across time. It was my turn to finish what she started. I sat with the estate lawyer, and together we began shifting things. The cafe I'd only dreamed of? I opened it. Right in the heart of Eugene, just a block from the park where she used to walk on Saturdays. I named it Alina's Corner. Painted the walls in soft sage and dusty rose. Filled it with shelves of used books and framed prints of her favorite paintings, mostly Georgia O'Keeffe and Mary Cassatt. But the final touch, the one that felt like justice, was the ring. I embedded it into the cafe countertop. Right at the register. A simple, understated piece of glass over it, polished and clean. Just enough so that if someone leaned close while paying for their coffee, they might notice it. A beautiful gold band with a small worn diamond. People asked about it all the time. Is that real? Yes. Whose is it? My mother's. I never said more. But it made me smile every time. Meanwhile, my father remained in Oak Haven, never knowing the full extent of what Mom had done, and I never told him. That was my revenge, not cruelty. Not abandonment. But knowing everything, and still choosing my own dignity over giving him the satisfaction of confession or confrontation. He asked me once, during one of our more lucid visits, why I never brought him to see the cafe. "You wouldn't like it," I said, sipping my coffee. "Too many flowers. And strong women." He chuckled weakly. I think, on some level, he understood. Maybe not everything. But enough. As time passed, he stopped asking about Marlena. Stopped trying to explain himself. I think he knew explanations were wasted on me. I didn't need apologies. I had Alina's corner. I had a ring that stayed where it belonged. I had control over the narrative. Over my own healing. And I had a legacy that honored the woman who gave me everything she could, even in death. That was enough. That was revenge. Not loud. Not violent. Not messy. But deeply satisfying. And it was mine.